I don't think people hate their jobs the way they say they do. I think it's something worse. I've been trying to explain that to myself without making it sound dramatic. Because hate feels clean. It feels like something you can point at and fix. If you hate something, you leave it. You change it. You do something about it. That's how it's supposed to work. But most people don't. Most people wake up, go to work, come home, distract themselves, sleep, and repeat it all again the next day. Not because they're excited, not because they've figured something out, just because that's what happens next. So it can't just be hate. There has to be something else there. Something quieter, something that doesn't push you to act, but also doesn't let you feel okay. Something that sits just beneath the surface of everything, never loud enough to confront directly, but never quiet enough to ignore completely. I started noticing it in moments that didn't look important. Not the obvious ones, not the stressful days or the times everything piles up. Those are easy to explain. Everyone understands stress. Everyone expects it. That's the version we're allowed to talk about. That's the version that gets sympathy. I mean, the moments where nothing is technically wrong, where everything is fine, and yet something still feels off, like opening your laptop in the morning and just sitting there for a few seconds longer than necessary. Not thinking, not planning, just delaying. As if starting the day requires more effort than it should, or reading a message and feeling this quiet resistance to replying, even though it would take less than a minute. Not because it's difficult, just because you don't want to engage with it. Or sitting in a meeting, hearing every word, responding at the right times, even contributing when needed. But not actually feeling present. Like you're slightly disconnected from everything that's happening, even though you're physically there. And the strange part is, if someone watched you in those moments, they wouldn't notice anything wrong. You look normal. You're doing your job. You're functioning. But internally, there's this low-level friction. Not enough to stop you, but enough to make everything feel heavier than it should. I used to think that meant something was wrong with the job itself. Maybe it was the role. Maybe it was the environment. Maybe it just wasn't the right fit. That's what everyone says, isn't it? It's not the work, it's the people. I just need something more aligned. I'm not passionate about this. Those explanations feel good because they suggest there's a solution. That there's a version of this where everything clicks, where you wake up and feel energized, where work doesn't feel like something you have to push through. But I started noticing something that didn't fit that idea. Even on the easier days, the lighter days, the days where nothing went wrong, that feeling was still there. That quiet resistance, that slight disconnect. And that's when it stopped feeling like a job problem. Because if it was just the job, then the good days should feel good. But they didn't. They just felt less bad. And that's a strange realization to sit with, that the best version of something still isn't something you'd choose. I think that's when the question started forming, the one I didn't really want to finish. If I really hated this, why don't I leave? It sounds simple when you say it out loud. People say it all the time. If you don't like your job, just get a different one. Life's too short to be stuck somewhere you're unhappy. It sounds logical, almost obvious, until you try to apply it to your own life. Because it's not just a job. It never really is. It's everything that sits around it. It's the structure of your life. It's the routines you've built. It's the expectations. And underneath all of that, it's the money. And I don't think we talk about that part honestly enough. We talk about salaries like they're just numbers, like they exist in isolation. We compare them, aim for higher ones, celebrate increases, complain when they feel too low. But we don't really talk about what that number quietly controls. Because once you start relying on it, everything begins to shape itself around it. Your rent adjusts to it, your bills depend on it, the things you sign up for, the commitments you make, the way you spend your time. It all starts to align with what you earn. It doesn't happen suddenly, it's gradual, almost unnoticeable. Until one day you realize your entire life is structured around a number that appears once a month. And removing that number isn't just inconvenient, it's destabilizing. I think that's the part people feel but don't say. Because once you admit that, the job isn't just a job anymore, it's support. It's stability. It's the thing holding everything else in place. And that changes the question entirely. It's no longer, do I like this? It becomes, can I afford not to have this? And those are very different questions. One is emotional, the other is survival, even if it doesn't feel dramatic enough to call it that. And most of the time, the second one wins, even if it costs you something. I started noticing how often that trade happens. Quietly, every day. You trade how you feel for stability. You trade your time for predictability. You trade your energy for something that keeps everything else running. And at first, it doesn't feel like a trade. It just feels normal. Because you don't see what you're giving up, it's not obvious. There's no moment where you consciously decide, I'm okay with this. It just becomes the default. You adjust, you normalize it, you tell yourself this is just what adulthood feels like. And maybe it is. Or maybe that's just what we say to make it easier to accept. I think the hardest part isn't the job itself. It's the moment you start seeing it clearly. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. You notice how your mood shifts before the week even starts. How certain times of the day feel heavier than others. How you measure your time not in moments, but in how long until you're finished. And you start asking questions you didn't ask before. Quietly. In the background. Is this it? Is this what I'm going to keep doing? How long can I do this for? And the uncomfortable part is you don't really have answers, or at least not answers you feel confident in. Because any answer that involves change runs straight into the same thing. Money. It always comes back to that. Not in an obvious way, not in a I want more kind of way, but in a I can't lose what I have kind of way. Which feels very different. Wanting more is optional. Not being able to lose what you have feels like a limit. Like a boundary you didn't consciously choose but now have to operate within. And I think that's where the feeling really comes from. Not hate, not frustration, just constraint, like your life has edges you didn't notice before, and now you can see them. I don't think people admit that. Because what do you do with that realization? There's no clean solution, no clear next step. You can't just walk away from something your entire life depends on, so instead you don't say it. You keep it internal. You keep showing up. You keep doing what you need to do, and from the outside, nothing changes. But inside, something has shifted. It's subtle. It doesn't break you. It just changes how everything feels. You stop expecting fulfillment. You stop looking for meaning in it. You start treating it like something to get through rather than something to be part of. And that's where it gets strange. Because you're still functioning. Still meeting expectations. Still doing what's required. But there's a distance now between you and what you're doing. And that distance isn't visible to anyone else, but you feel it. Every day. I think that's what people mean when they say they've mentally checked out. Not in a dramatic way. Not in a way that causes problems. Just in a quiet, internal way. Where you're still there, but not fully. And the strange part is, life keeps rewarding that. You still get paid. You still meet expectations. Nothing collapses. So there's no immediate reason to change anything. Which makes it even harder to justify doing something different. Because on paper, everything works. It supports you. It sustains your life. It does exactly what it's supposed to do. So how do you argue against that? How do you explain that something can be working perfectly and still feel wrong? That's not an easy thing to articulate, so most people don't. They just keep going. And I think that's why people don't admit how they really feel about their jobs. It's not because they don't know. It's not because they're lying. It's because saying it out loud doesn't actually change anything. It just makes it real. And once it's real, you have to sit with it. The trade, the dependency, the quiet understanding that you're not really doing this because you want to, but because you need to. So instead, you soften it. You joke about it. You say things like, it's just work, or no one really likes their job. And those things sound harmless. But they keep the deeper thought just far enough away. Because once you fully see it, it doesn't go away. You'll still wake up at the same time, still go to the same place, still do the same tasks, but internally, it feels different, heavier, more deliberate, like you're aware of the trade you're making every single day. And maybe that's what this is. Not hate, not even dissatisfaction, just a quiet awareness that stopping isn't really an option. So you keep going. Not because you love it, not even because you chose it, but because everything else depends on it. And from the outside, nothing looks different. But inside, even if you never say it out loud,